So this video is not going to give you all the answers, but it's giving you the concepts and the building blocks that are going to help you find the answer. So when you're looking at a different key, let's say instead of going from in the key of C to D minor, E minor, and up and so on, we want to do it in a different key. So let's move it up to D, the key of D. If we were on the piano, we'd be running into some black keys now, but here it's pretty easy. So we're going to go D is our 1. We know our 2 is one step up from the D, so that's an E, but it's a minor. The next step up is going to be also a minor, F sharp minor. And then it gets easier again. Back to 4 is a major, 5 is a major, and 6 is B minor. So if you're playing in the key of D, chances are those are going to be the 6 chords you see over and over again. Now that might seem a lot to take on right now, but in practice it's simpler than that, because most songs that we hear, most popular songs, they're only going to use about 4 chords. Many of them only use 3. And the typical patterns, we're going to be back in the key of C here, is 1, 4, 5. So your first note in the scale is C, your 4th, F is a major chord, 5th is a G. You can write a whole library of music just on these. Let me pick something I think that you know. Let's see. You have to pardon my singing here, or lack thereof. You've heard this pattern over and over again. It's how is starts as Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It's also how Train starts their ever so popular, can't escape it on the internet. Hey, 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 hey. So we like to think about the words and lyrics when we sing songs. To practice and get better at this, start thinking about the numbers. 1, 1, 1 and 5, back 2, down 2, 6, because it's an A minor. That's our 6th note up from C. Then we'll do a 4. Get it one more time. 1, and we're going to 5. 3-chord example. Here's another one you might remember. Strumming my 6th string. I should say 4-string. I'm strumming my 4-string out on the porch swing. See all those tourists all covered with oil. That's a 5, 4, 5, and I'm the front swing, and then na 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 na, 4, 5, na 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 na, and I'm going back to 1. The words aren't that important. Just remember this. 4 and I'm 5 and back. So there's a ton of examples on YouTube. In fact, if you just search under 3-chord songs, ukulele, medley, or something like that, you'll see people who can put 20 or more in a row. All right, it's time for a quiz. Let's look at some examples. This is one we've already gone over, so that should be no surprise. You've got 3 major chords there. And as you might guess, you have 3 major chords in a scale, and 1, 4, and 5, in this case, are C, F, and G. Next one, you've got to guess on your own. All right, what key is this song in? One handy thing to note on these 3-chord songs, which usually have 3 major chords, not always, but usually 3 major chords, the 3 major chords are always going to be 1, 4, and 5. So when you see the 2 that are together, the 2 that would be adjacent in the scale, you know those are the 4 and the 5. And the other one is probably down at the 1. So which 2 are adjacent here? the C and the D. That's right. That's your 4 and 5. So this is the number 1 in the scale would be G. So it's in the key of G. Of course, we have to bump it up a notch. We're not all 3-chord songs here. This one should be a familiar pattern. You look at the 2 major chords that are right next to each other, F and G. You can probably guess that's the 4 and the 5. So the 1 is C, and just as we talked about in those progressions, the number 2 is a minor. That would be D minor. So this fits very well, you know it's in the key of C. Try a different key here and throw a little curve at you. So if you look at this, you've got 4, there are some 7ths here, A7, B7, E7. When you have the 7th, it really doesn't affect if it's a major chord. That still is going to conform with the 1-4-5. So sticking with the 1-4-5 rule for Rock Around the Clock, we're adding the 7th in to give it a little more of a, you know, rock feel to it. But it still would be in the key of E. That's right. And take another song like Good Lovin' by the Rascals. 1, 1, 4 and a 5 and back to 4, then a 1, 1, 4 and a 5 back to 4 and a 1, 1. Add your own lyrics and I will strum, strum. All right. Here's one. I'm going to throw in one extra chord. This is also in the key of C. This is My Girl. I've got sunshine on a 1, 4, on a cloudy back to 1. And when it's cold outside, I'm playing 1, then 4 in the month of May. We're going to get real tricky here. We're going to add one more chord. 1, 2, that's our D minor. 4 and a 5. 1 and a 2 and a 4 and a 5. And the rest of the song is no more complicated than that. 1, 2, 4, 5. So when you start to think about these numbers, you can play easily 80% of the popular music out there if you just know 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. You'll be moving past that intermediate stage. And bump it up another notch here. Let's look at this one. Song Sung Blue by Neil Diamond. So what would be the 2 adjacent major chords? A and G. So if that's 4 and 5, what would that make 1? Good, you guessed it, it's D. And the 2 would be that minor chord, E minor. Let's look over here at another example. This one looks trickier, but it's actually a perfect example of all 6 chords that we have talked about. So what are your 2 adjacent major? C and D. If they're 4 and 5, then what's your 1? That would be G, so this would be key of G, but let's double check with all of these minors. Look at A minor and B minor, that's right, they're the 1 and 2. E minor is the 6th, and that's all of the 6 chords we've been talking about in the key of G. I picked a Paul Simon song here because it's not in your typical ukulele key or guitar key for that matter. But applying the same principles, you can look at which 2 of these are adjacent to each other in a scale. The 2 major chords are B flat and C. If they're the 4 and the 5, the 1 is, that's right, F and D minor. Does that still fit our pattern? Yep, let's see, F, G, A, B flat, C, D minor is the 6th. Yep, so that works. Let's look at a more contemporary song. This is Sounds of Sunshine by Michael Franti. So even in a much more modern song, take a look at this in a nice easy ukulele key. You should be familiar with that 4 and 5 now being F and G. Your 2 and 6 are in minors, and it fits perfectly. But you go, hey, but James, wait, I can find songs in my songbooks that don't conform to those rules. So look at this from my favorite things, Rodgers and Hammerstein. So if you look carefully here, you'll see that there's some extra chords thrown in. They're not all in the 1, 4, 5 are major and 2, 3, 6 are minor. And that's absolutely a great thing. I've said throughout this will help you with 80, maybe 85 or 90% of music, especially the more current the music you're playing, the more pop music you're playing, frankly, the more simple it's likely to be. If you play some Rodgers and Hammerstein or some other older things, they will tend to be more innovative with their chord structures. Some modern artists as well, Billy Joel, I mean, you can think of a lot of bands that seem hard to cover. They're going to use more complicated chord structures because they can, and it's fun. And often writing a bridge, a song will go to an extension. It could go to a relative minor or a different key. Makes it very interesting. So there are exceptions to this, what we've been talking about, but this will get you most of the way there with most of the songs that you're going to be encountering. Building block. But just a quick recap. First, we covered what a half step is, which is the distance of the sound on each of the frets on your ukulele. And if you play a bunch of those in a row, that's a chromatic scale. But our main focus is the major scale, which is what most Western and popular music is based on. So that sounds like this. Do, re, mi, fa. But once we have those intervals, we can now apply more rules to the chords. So if we were playing not just a scale of C, but in the key of C, we know the chords are going to sound like this. C chord as the 1, D minor is the 2, E minor is the 3, F, which is the 4th tone up from C, is F, and then a G major, and the 6th tone up is an A minor. We also learned you can transpose that, so just picking on a D here, starting with a D chord, then E minor, F sharp minor, G, A is your 5th note up from D, and then finishing with your 6th, which is a B minor. So we could go all the way up the fretboard in any key, playing a major key, and that's going to give you a really good idea of what chord you're going to have to go to, and that's going to help you later when you try to start playing better by ear. So anyways, I hope this is a good start, and look forward to doing the next video with you. We're going to do the circle of fifths. It's going to be awesome. Thanks a lot. Keep strumming. And we now have some clues, though, about the intervals that we need to skip notes to make a good major scale. So we're going to stay in C. And as you saw on the paper, it actually took 8 different steps for us to get when we're doing a major scale up to the octave, which makes sense because the word octave comes from the Latin root octo, or 8. And that's a really important concept. So high C, low C, they are the same note. It's important because all of these intervals are governed by the laws of physics. We make the sound by striking the string and it vibrates at a certain frequency. In fact, this C vibrates at 440 hertz. So 440 times a second this moves back and forth. And then when we cut the string length in half, we're actually doubling that frequency. So that's what happens when you have an octave. You go up 1 octave, it's twice as high or twice as fast on the frequency compared to the going down. You go up 1 more octave, it's even 1 octave, 1 higher. It's 2 times the number of frequencies. So if we started at 440, we go to 880, go 1 octave higher, it's twice 880 or 1760. There's no quiz on that, but I bring out the physics part because all of these notes have a relationship that either creates some kind of harmonic, pleasant sound like a basic C chord, or it can create a more dissonant sound, the constructive interference that comes from major chords tends to make them sound a little louder and a little more pleasant, as compared to some chords which are intentionally adding some dissonance. So that would be some destructive interference.